My name is Helen Hou-Sandi, and I'm going to be talking about making your custom content management disappear into the WordPress admin. If you were here for Jake's talk before mine, he talked about what would core do, which was about taking a look at some plugins and some best practices for integrating things like your plugins and themes into the WordPress core, and sort of trying to erase the line between where your custom additions to WordPress, like for your clients or for your own sites or themes or plugins, erasing that line between those custom additions and WordPress core itself, and giving your client or yourself or whoever the feeling of a completely integrated experience. This helps with usability and learnability. You know, once they get used to how something works, they have a much easier time continuing on and learning about the interface and not feeling like they're doing something wrong just because something looks different. You know, with your average non-technical user, they tend to blame themselves when they find something not working. They think, well, I must be doing it wrong, you know, because it's not working for me. But often, you know, we can help them by creating an experience that allows them to learn and become used to the interface and not always be asking questions about how to make something work. So a little bit about myself. I am a user experience engineer with 10 Up, and we're always hiring. I think there are 12 of us now, full-time. What my job entails is pretty much development of all kinds. I slice Photoshop files all the way to making sure that things are cached nicely for WordPress.com VIP. I also allegedly do cross-team work on user interfaces for other team members, and I also contribute between 15 and 20% of my time to WordPress core, and that includes core development and also some community initiatives that you'll see around. I am at Helen Hou-Sandi on Twitter, and I tweet, I think, quite a bit now, and usually about WordPress. And of course, I'm a core contributor, and you'll find me on the credits screen, which is kind of fun. Makes me nervous sometimes, but it's pretty fun to see myself there. Okay, how many of you have seen or heard something like this happen in a presentation or, you know, like a training session, where somebody says something? This shows you that I'm a developer, not a designer. This happened at a talk at WordCamp San Francisco last year. That was really ugly, and you know, there were color problems and whatever, but you know, he had a good laugh at himself. I'm a developer, not a designer, and that's why it looks like this. And I think one of the great things about using WordPress as our building platform is that a lot of time and care is spent on the administrative interface, and by using that, we don't have to think so hard about how we, you know, can design the interfaces that we need to build. Calling it developer-driven design, right? It's almost never a good idea. It's usually kind of, oh God, so it works, but it's not pretty, and your users are left feeling confused or aggravated or something not positive about the interface itself. So if we integrate into the admin and we use what's available to us in the admin with CSS and HTML structure and even JavaScript interactions, we'll be able to create something that feels familiar at once without too much work on our part. And so this philosophy, decisions, not options, the fewer options we give to people, the more secure they're going to feel that it's just going to work. Not like, oh, if I configure this wrong, it might blow up in my face, or if I upgrade my WordPress, then all my options are going to disappear. So we like to just kind of make decisions, and that also applies to when you're managing custom content, which is the base of my talk, talking about custom post types or custom content types, whatever you'd like to call them, and post meta, which is extra information attached to your posts. When we're integrating those, it's usually best to make a decision as to how you want to present the editing interface to your user or to your client, so that they just learn it once, and then they can continue on their happy way, editing and managing their own content and feeling in control. So design and UI, there are a lot of things going on with design and UI. I'm not a designer, like, at all. At all. I can maybe crop something in Photoshop and change its color, and that's all you want to ask me to do for design. But there are a lot of things going on, both in the WordPress admin and just in design in general. These are some concepts like typography, iconography, some of the basic layouts, white space, having hover and active or selected states, and then the usage of buttons versus links. Buttons versus links is one thing I do want to mention in particular. We use buttons for interactions that keep you on the screen or are submitting a form. For instance, in WordPress, if you've paid attention, there's a primary button class, which creates a blue button, and there should only really ever be one blue button on any given screen because that's supposed to be your primary action, and there should only be one on a screen, or else you probably have too much going on that screen. There's also just a white, gray kind of button that we call a secondary button, and its CSS class is just button, and we use those for other interactions. But we use links for actions that take you away from the screen you're currently working on. So if you think about the post-editing screen, in the publishing box, there's actually, I think it says move to trash or just trash, and it's a red link. It's red because it's destructive, so it's telling you that you're about to do something sort of destructive to your site by putting it in the trash. And it's also a link because once it deletes it, it actually takes you out of that screen and back to the list of posts that you can edit. So it becomes a link because it takes you away. But you don't have to remember all of that. There is the WordPress.org UI style guide. It's at .org/styleguide.wordpress.com, I think. This is a link, and I'll post a link to my slides, which are HTML, after my presentation so that you can go back and peruse it. But we have a style guide that needs updating. Some of my community time also goes into this, is trying to get it updated. There's a lot of information, but we try to keep pages on about, say, typography. So this will tell you, what our primary font stack is, and what that looks like, and so on and so forth. So you can take a look and say, okay, I wonder how this works in core, or I wonder what this looks like, and you can just go take a look at the style guide, and it should tell you, although it's possible that something will be outdated at any given moment. So, moving forward, from here on out, I'm going to be talking through code, basically. It's a developer talk, and there's quite a bit of code. I'm not going to walk you through it step by step, and that's also another reason why these are HTML slides, so you can go back and you can grab the code if you want, dissect it, try it out, make it blow up, and learn from your mistakes, whatever helps you learn best. But I'm just going to show you some techniques, some more creative techniques for integrating things like metaboxes and that kind of thing into the editing interface. So again, the focus of my talk is custom content types, custom post types, and post meta. How many of you have ever done a custom post type or a custom meta box? Most of you. Cool. How many of you have ever looked at, let's say, the default custom fields meta box that comes built into WordPress? Not as many of you. That's actually probably a good thing. It's not very usable. It gives you all the information that you want, sort of, but it's kind of, you have to enter the names of the meta fields that you want and then the value, and it's just confusing, especially if you think about an end user. They're not going to remember that, your video URL, key name is _video_URL. They're never, ever going to remember that. So it's better for us to build meta boxes to hold that kind of information. Okay, but before we even get into that stuff, talk a little bit about iconography and integrating into core. With post types, you get two kinds of icons. There's a 16-pixel square one for the admin menu. When I talk about the admin menu, I'm talking about the menu that's on the left-hand side. The bar at the top is called the toolbar. And then there's a 32-pixel square one for your adding and editing screens. This is called a screen icon. You'll also find them on settings pages and that sort of thing. And if you take a close look at what's in core, these screen icons are always black and white. Well, they're monochrome because there's also a blue admin theme variant. But you'll find that they're always monochrome, and so I try to keep them black and white. Most people use the gray theme, and so that it just blends into the admin. They don't think, oh, God, why is that icon suddenly totally different? So this is an example. I'm using an events custom post type as my example here. I've got a little calendar icon, and it's black and white, and that's on my screen. And this is code for it. And one thing I do want to note about the code is that it injects CSS, and I make sure that my CSS is only injected in the appropriate screens. It's not everywhere in the admin, because it could potentially conflict with something else, and also just isn't good to leave your stuff lying everywhere. Okay, and the next part is the 16 pixel square icon that goes in the admin menu. These actually, in core, they have hover states, which are CSS sprites. They're black and white by default when they're not active, and then they're in color when hovered over or it's the open menu item. And so we can get the same effect by creating a CSS sprite with a black and white version and the color version, and then again injecting some CSS to make that happen, to make it move correctly when we hover over it or we're in the particular state. And the other thing that we do is that we don't register anything for the menu icon when we're registering our post type. That's in my code. I also filed a track ticket, 28052, for supporting CSS sprites for the menu icon argument in register post type. And we'll see if that happens. But I think that probably means somebody has to refactor the admin menu code, which nobody wants to do. Coop is saying no. Okay. Another thing that I like to think about less being more. I kind of have the same philosophy as I do with trying to keep a clean house, which is if I bring something in, I try to take one or two things out of my house. And I try to think of that same thing when I'm talking about the admin itself. If I'm adding something, what can I do to reduce the complexity of it? If I'm adding 3 more metaboxes, or 3 more custom fields, can I combine them into one metabox instead of making 3 separate ones? Or can I even combine them into an existing one so that I'm not adding even more stuff into the interface, which is already pretty complex, for your end user. It's very powerful, and by being very powerful and giving them all of this control, we tend to add more and more complexity to the screen. Okay, so now I've moved into a slider gallery kind of custom post type. And this is the screen for adding a new one. And this is all I've got. I've got a metabox for the slide image, which is actually just the featured image metabox, which has been relabeled a little bit. And then the publish box. There's no content editor, there's no title editor, there's none of that, no taxonomy, it's nothing, because you don't need it. We're just making a post type to hold, let's say, slides for the home page. And we can just add them like this, because all it needs is an image for this particular purpose. And this is how we do it. All we need to do is support the thumbnail. But you'll notice that this metabox here is in a different place than it normally would be. This is what the screen looks like by default when I register my custom post type. I have my featured image metabox is over in the smaller, the narrower right-hand column, and says featured image, set featured image. And I think featured image is, it's useful terminology, but it doesn't always apply to your use case. And in this case, it is a slide image. It's the image of the slide. And saying it's the featured image when it's not a blog post and it's only used in one place is a little bit confusing. So what I do is I add some code that will then take that metabox, move it into the centered column, the main column, retitle the metabox slide image, and then change the text here to say select/upload a slide image or remove slide image if there's one already selected. And this is code for that. And there's a note here that it doesn't work by Ajax, which means that once you've added the item or when you remove it, that the link inside the metabox itself won't actually be correct because of how this works. So I filed a track ticket for it yesterday, I think. We'll see if that gets fixed, and then this will work even better. Okay, moving on. So once we've got our slides, they go into what's called the list table. That's the list of posts that you can edit. This is what it's going to look like by default. Because I don't have a title field, everything gets called auto draft, which is ugly and kind of useless. And I also get the date that I published it, which 4 slides in one place, probably not very helpful. So what I'll do is I'll kind of alter this, and I'll only put the information that I need. Any idea what information I would actually need for the slider? Sorry? Thumbnail? Yep, that's all I need. I just need the image of the slide, right? So that's what I do to the list table. I take all those other columns out. I leave in the checkbox. The checkbox one is necessary for bulk actions. But I remove all the other columns and I just put one in that's the slide image, and then you get a thumbnail or the message that you don't have an image if there isn't one. The other thing that I would do probably for a client is use, well, Jake's simple page ordering plugin, which can take a post type and you can kind of drag and drop its order in the list table itself, which is really neat, and it saves over Ajax, and then you can order it that way in the front end. So that's a plug for a 10-up plugin. But it works really well. Yay. So to accomplish this, more code, you know, to mess with the columns, and I'm not going to talk to it if you don't have enough time. Watch my time. Okay, moving on. Another thing that you find often, going back to my events custom post type, is that you'll find the need for some jQuery UI components, such as the date, right? A date picker is so much easier than entering a date. And then if you allow a user to enter a date, then you have to kind of, you know, format it correctly, store it the way that you want it, and, you know, just string to time everything, I guess. So we can use jQuery UI. As of 3.3, all of the jQuery UI components are registered in core, available for you to enqueue when you need them. And then there is no CSS. I have a track ticket open for that too, about CSS for jQuery UI in core, one that we would hopefully create to make look like core and integrate thoroughly. And until that's there, or if it never makes it there, it's up on GitHub, and I do see people using it from time to time, which is really nice. So you can use date picker. And in my code, which is on the following slides, you'll notice that I use the MySQL date format, which is 4-digit year, 2-digit month, 2-digit date. The reason why I use it that way and I store it that way is because you can cast to date when you are doing a query or a comparison with the meta value, and also it sorts alphabetically, which is pretty cool. So then you have to worry about how it sorts. So there's code for that, for getting jQuery UI into the Metabox. Here you'll see me including the script because I don't have to register it. I think they're all registered as jQuery-UI- the name of the component. So you'll find all of them. Oh, and another cool thing to note. In register post type, there's actually a register Metabox callback argument that you can provide that then allows you to provide the name of the callback function for your adding a Metabox. So then you don't have to do yet another, you know, action hooked on to add Metaboxes for just that post type. So we'll do it for just that post type, which is pretty neat. And here is my list table for this custom post type. And now I have changed it so that instead of just title, it says event title. That's just retitling the basic title column. And then I have the event date, which is now a sortable column. And again, that's why I kept it as that date format so that it sorts easily. You could also store it as a timestamp, and it would also sort correctly. Oh, and one thing I meant to mention on the list table for this, there are what are called row actions in the list table, and this is the stuff that says edit, trash, sometimes quick edit. Down here in this column, when you hover over, that's actually hard-coded into the title column in the list table. So if you remove the title column, you really, really need to add that back somewhere so that it appears that your users can actually get in to edit it later. And that's what, you'll see that in the code. It adds row actions back in this column, in the slide column. So going back to this, we have a sortable column, and because this is just the basic title column, you'll get the row actions when you hover over it. And there's code for that. We add the columns the same way as we would before, which you'll see when you look at the code examples. Down here, I actually have an idea, which I didn't implement, but you can use getOption date format to format the date the way the user wants to. So they can choose how they want to format their date, and then you can actually show that in the list table, make it more readable for them. Making a column sortable, it basically just boils down to when you click the header, it adds a query yard, and then you catch that on the request filter, and just add it to the query to sort it appropriately, and it'll do that for you. That's also in the code. Okay. This is something that I did very recently, as in this past week. Jake talked a little bit about a plugin called Multiple Post Thumbnails. What Multiple Post Thumbnails does is exactly what it says. It gives you the ability to have multiple post thumbnails, and it adds a new Metabox for each of those post thumbnails that you subsequently add. So let's say you have your regular post thumbnail, which you're using for, well, in this example, I'm using it for square crops. And the client in this case wanted control over every single post thumbnail size, which are really orientations, right? So we have a portrait image, which is usually of a person. But if we were to allow WordPress to auto crop it down to a landscape size, that person is going to get beheaded, right? Because it's cropping into the middle. So the client wanted full control over how they crop or present, or even just a totally different image for different orientations of a post thumbnail, which are used in different places, like in a slider in one place, in the archive list in another place. So we had 3 post thumbnails, and we added this, and we found that the client was extremely confused. They loved everything else about the editing interface, and they're in love with WordPress, they're really happy, but they're just totally confused about how this multiple post thumbnail thing works. I made a little screencast so you can see. So down here on the right side, you can see the 3 meta boxes, right? In each one of them, you can click the Set Featured Image link, okay, and it brings up the thick box. That's this layer is called. And you can click on the Gallery tab, and then you're looking at it, and you go, oh my god, what am I supposed to do next? What did I even click in the first place? It's taking like 3 clicks to get here. I have no idea what's going on anymore. Do I insert it into the post? Do I edit the caption? What's going on? Okay, I think I was trying to set it as my portrait image, and I clicked it, and I don't know, like, what did I do next? it doesn't close. So then I close it, and this isn't even the right image size, right? It's just kind of whatever size. I don't even know how that's determined, honestly. I should probably look, but and then you can remove it and then set it again. And the other thing that this particular client did not like was that when you remove and set a featured image, it's actually saved by Ajax, and this is post-meta, so it will affect a live post on their site if they're doing this. And this particular client likes to kind of stage changes and take a look at how they work or feel before they actually push them live. And so for it to automatically save that data when they're just testing something out was a no-no for them in particular. It doesn't mean it's a no-no for everybody, but this also helped to alleviate that issue for them. So, moving on into the next screencast, I combined the 3 thumbnails into one Metabox that then displays the images in the appropriate orientation and proportion, and also gives them a much more simplified way of selecting the image when they're inside the thick box, the media gallery popover. So here's my screencast for that. So here's my single meta box, and I put it in the middle because it's a big one. And then when I hit upload or select image, now there's no from URL tag because you can't do that for a featured image. In the gallery space, you don't get gallery options because they're irrelevant for what they're doing. And when you click on an image to show, it only has a select image button or to be able to delete it. And that's all there is, because that's all they're doing with it. And it pops it into place in here. Thank you. I think Mo may have reviewed this code. Maybe. And then it does the same thing if you're selecting from the media library. It allows you to do the same thing. It just cleans up everything for you. So you can select one. And you can remove it, and if you don't like those changes, you don't have to save them. It'll just lose them if you navigate away. So that's kind of a neat thing I think I did this past week that I'm really proud of. And I've shared some of the code for it. The code, yes?
Is this, did you modify the plugin or did you do a custom one?
I did not modify the plugin. So I'm still running the plugin technically. So if they decide later that they don't like this at all, you just remove, it's an include in the theme because it's on VIP, which means that we can't run our own plugins on VIP. So we have to put it all in like what basically amounts to your theme's functions.php.
Is this would be an awesome improvement to the actual multiple post functions?
Yeah, maybe I should talk to them about it. But basically what mine does is it extends it. So I have, mine's all encapsulated in one class, but what it does is it removes all of the metaboxes. It also has all of the information for how you add the multiple post thumbnails in the first place, and it iterates through that array and adds all of those post thumbnails, and then uses that information later to remove the metaboxes, add them back into this metabox. Everything is just iterated through. I don't have a whole lot of repeated code. It's kind of neat. But the code that I'm sharing here is how to add an image field into a metabox. It basically amounts to a hidden input that holds the ID of that attachment because we're using the built-in media library, so we just get attachment IDs. And then you have an image without a source, when you're first injecting it or with a source. I use the screen reader text class to hide things most of the time instead of setting display none. The reason why I do this is mostly because it's really convenient. So instead of having, when I take out the display none part, instead of having to wonder, okay, what kind of item am I displaying now? Is it an inline item? Is it a block level item? Is it a table cell? I don't have to decide what kind of display it needs to be. I can just remove that class and it'll appear. So it's a little more generic and easy to use. And then we have links. Links for uploading, selecting the image, and removing it. The upload one will then trigger the thickbox overlay. And then the remove one it clears out the source of the image and the hidden input. Here's the JavaScript for the editing page, adding page. This is the action we've bound to the click on the select upload link. It does td_show, so td is thickbox, right, which we all hate, but whatever. There's not a whole lot we can do at the moment. So it brings up thickbox with media-upload.php in it. And we add a couple of query args for the for the meta type that we're doing. So in this case, it's an image. You could also do stuff like PDFs and that kind of thing. And also meta preview size. That's how I get the size that I want set back to the meta box when I'm done with it. iframe, and then the remove bind. And then what else I do is I inject some CSS and JavaScript into the head of the thickbox itself, and all it's doing is just doing display none on a bunch of stuff, and then adding or changing the text on the insert into post button into select image. That's basically all this is doing. And in my real code, it actually generates some CSS classes based on the names and IDs of what I've added using the multiple post thumbnails plugin, because it then removes all of those other links that we didn't need for setting the featured image. So I don't know if you noticed that all of those links that say set as featured image are also gone because we don't need them anymore. We just need the select image button. So that's what that does. And then it adds a couple of hidden inputs, which we need later. Once you click the select image button, then it sends it back to the editor. So what we do there is we intercept that sendback from thickbox. We intercept it, and instead of forming HTML that is then inserted into the visual editor, we kind of intercept that and we inject another script onto the page that then looks for the input and the image and adds the value for the hidden input and the source for the image and just makes it appear. So that's this. Pretty neat. Okay, here's another neat thing that we can do. We can actually make a special Metabox just for static home pages. Oftentimes with a client site, you're setting up the basic page structure for them first, right? They're not going through and saying, okay, under my reading settings, I'm setting my static front page to this page. You've done it for them already, right? But sometimes we've got staging environments, and we've got, you know, the production environment, or maybe even more environments in between. So we can't always keep track of the ID of the page, right? It probably shouldn't be hard coding IDs into anything that you're doing. That's like a big no-no. So what you can do, it's actually an option. That's how this is stored. It's called page on front. And so what we do here is we add a special Metabox for the home page. This is an excerpt from one that it's actually a very big Metabox, and it's sort of structured the way the home page is laid out. It gives the client the opportunity to know exactly where the text is going. It gives them some descriptive text so they understand without always having to consult the help. And also, because it compartmentalizes everything, it makes it much harder for them to mess something up, right? Like, we're not putting divs into the visual editor and then hoping that they don't delete them, right? That's like, it's a really bad idea to do that. So here we've just made a Metabox that holds all the little different things that are on the home page. This one just happens to be extremely modular, short text everywhere. So we add that Metabox, and then what we can do here in your add Metaboxes action callback, you can remove post type support for the editor, which sounds really sketchy. You know, that you can remove post type support for something on an add Metaboxes action, but it totally works. It fires right before the screen looks for post type support for the editor to insert it. It doesn't work for the other Metaboxes on the screen, so the editor isn't in a Metabox, right? It's just printed onto the screen. Everything else on the edit screen is in a Metabox. So doing that here won't work because they haven't been registered yet or added yet. Or it might work if you run it late enough, and then you can remove the Metaboxes. But that includes stuff like thumbnails and whatever. I don't think you can remove support for the thumbnails in this action. It'd have to run earlier. But you can remove the post type support for the editor. And so then the editor just won't appear for that one page, the one page that you have set as your static front page. Okay, another thing we can do, we can use a jQuery/prototype plugin library called Chosen, which makes multi-selects much more user-friendly. I use them quite often for things involving taxonomies. In this particular screenshot, this is what it looked like before. This is the multi-select. How many of you have experienced the woes of a multi-select? Yeah, where like you're trying to select a bunch of stuff and then you accidentally click one or you hit a key and then it's just selected one thing again. You're like, oh my God, are you serious? I have to go through this whole list again and hold command and click all the different things I want. It's a pain. And so this is what it looked like before, and it's also large. You know, the inputs are large. So what I do is I use Chosen, which kind of replaces this. This is still underneath, but Chosen will kind of overlay on top of it and allow you a much easier to use interface, which includes the ability to type the name of an option, and it'll kind of filter through them, and you can select it, you can X them out, you can unselect on a single select, which is really cool. You don't have to build an empty none option. You can actually deselect a select. There's also placeholders, all kinds of really cool stuff. And it looks like the WordPress admin by default. Their own theme looks like the WordPress admin. So it totally just integrates and it looks beautiful. Here I have a blog post. I almost never write blog posts about WordPress, but here I have one about using Chosen to replace the taxonomy Metabox, and this is the code for it up on GitHub. Another thing that I do, so this is post-meta, but using term names from various taxonomies, or I think in this case just a category taxonomy, but you can combine taxonomies for use in one using opt groups, which is pretty cool. Or you can combine a bunch of taxonomies into one Metabox. So if you think about what taxonomy Metaboxes look like, right? When you have one for a hierarchical taxonomy, like categories, you get a big Metabox with checkboxes in them, and you can add one. So it's a pretty big Metabox. And the tags one is a little bit shorter, but not by much, and you can still add them and that kind of thing. So it's Chosen, you can't add them. But again, sometimes with clients, you find that they don't really want to be adding terms all the time, and you might want to prevent typos, you know, if they're really important. And they still have access to the taxonomy screen to add and edit terms individually somewhere else, just not on the edit screen itself. But But you can also use it to combine a bunch of taxonomies into one metabox. Instead of 3 large metaboxes making you scroll way, way down on the screen, you combine them into one short little one and make it easier for the client, who also will probably be happy that it's like this to use and not like a multi-select or having to type in the same name all the time if you use tags, that kind of thing. Okay. There's also a better place for status-related meta. Sometimes you'll find people who add an entire metabox, and I'm totally guilty of this before I knew that I could do this. Adding a metabox just to say, toggle the visibility of this item, right? So you get a whole new metabox, and all it has is a checkbox saying this is visible to logged-in members or not. A much better place to put this is here in the publish box. You can add things to it. You can add items inside, well, actually after the main items. So you can add more checkboxes. So this is for a site that does listings. So it has checkboxes for if the listing has been claimed by a company, if it's a featured one, and if it's a premium one. And these all affect things like how it displays on the front end, or internal communication, all kinds of stuff it affects. But we've added these checkboxes here because they're related to the publishing status, essentially, of this item. And also they're just checkboxes, so they're really nice and easy to put in this meta box here. And this is code for it. A note in my code, there are inline styles that you need before 3.4, like a bunch of wrapping divs and border top and that kind of stuff. But you don't need it anymore as of 3.4, and so of course you're using the latest, so you don't need to worry about those inline styles. Another thing to talk about, you can have default content in the editing screen. So you can do title, content, and excerpt, the names of the filters. What these do is they actually inject text into those inputs, so it's actual text, and it'll save if you save the post with that filler text in there. An advantage of doing it this way is if you have a client who always needs things laid out in a certain way, like the titles are always in a certain format, so you can do it that way, and so they're like really prompted to edit it and make sure that it follows that format. There is one placeholder available in Core, at least that I know of, for enter title here. So let's say I used to work for a university, and we had faculty as a custom post type in WordPress. And instead of saying, enter title here in the title entry field, it said enter faculty name, first, last, suffix, something like that as a placeholder, so that they understand what they're supposed to enter into that field, because they didn't need a template so much as they just needed a prompt. Some more things you can do. You can do repeatable fields. I have a really, really rough gist up on GitHub. It's really rough because it comes from bespoke code, so it's not really reusable at all, and it's very procedural, like ugly PHP, right? But this is what it does. It'll give you the ability to, say, have a table and repeat the table rows, so you can have multiple sets of the same data. And these will all save, at least the way that I save them, and I'll just save them in one multi-dimensional array as your meta value, because I never need to query by it. And then you can look at using other jQuery UI components. I've seen really cool uses of draggable and sortable. They usually go together, right? Draggable and sortable. There are also tabs that you can use, and looking at the styling for them in Core. There are a couple of different styles of tabs in Core, so that's something to watch out for. And people have debates over whether it's better to have them horizontally across the top or vertically down the side. I guess it's a big issue. I don't know. Some plugins to note. PosterPost is a really, really great and powerful plugin, and it looks more or less like it should belong in Core. There are a couple of things that I have issues with, but it's a really good plugin and it's powerful. The simple page ordering one that I mentioned, where you can drag and drop things into order in the list table itself. BBPress, yay! Which is now as a plugin just custom post types, which is awesome, and the editing interface is great. It integrates into Core and you can understand it. It's very powerful, and it can be a little confusing for users sometimes just because it is so different, but it integrates beautifully. And then that multiple post thumbnails plugin, which I like what it does, but it kind of makes me mad because the UI totally sucks. So that's me. And then we have links to Jake's talk from earlier, What Would Core Do, and a presentation from Mike Schinkel about mastering custom post types. And this is if you need to go back and kind of look at how you register a post type in the first place and the basics of adding metaboxes and also when to use post meta versus taxonomies, that kind of thing. So, thank you. That's all for my slides. Any questions? Yes.
Sorry if I missed this. I chose poorly about which session to go to. I came in about halfway through. My biggest thing I was wondering if you have a solution for is a plugin that tells you explicitly where you want a set of images to go. A whole, like, set up a folder and put these in there, because every job I've done, I've been frustrated by the uploads folder and the way that WordPress loves to organize it, and I want complete and utter control over it at all times.
So the questions about the uploads folder and how it's organized, or rather not organized, I don't personally know of a plugin that deals with it. I don't know if anybody else does. It would be really nice to see, well, the media library is one of the older things in core at this point, so it needs some attention, but it's a very complex area and there's a lot going on. So we try to work on it when we can, but it's hard, and then when you make an improvement, people go, well, where are all the other improvements, right? But it would be really nice to see the ability to sort things into folders based on their type or that kind of thing, rather than just by date. And I don't know of a plugin off the top of my head.
Needs to put things up in the group of, like above WP or parallel WP content, not inside of the theme folder, to just have complete control in there. But I absolutely love the drag and drop interface and everything. But if something, a prompt popped up and said, here, you want to select from a list of where you want this to go.
Okay. Well, I think that's definitely something you'd have to look at plugin territory for, just because it's probably specific to your particular needs, right? Most people don't need it, probably. They don't need the option for it. But definitely take a look at plugins. And if anybody knows of a plugin that gives you more granular control of where your uploads go, let them know, because I don't know. Yep. Yes?
You seem to be with it with the WordPress development. I'm wondering if there is any hope for the set feature image workflow. Making it more user-friendly.
So the question is about the set featured image workflow and how I think it totally sucks and should be different. And the chances for it changing. I think that chances for it changing would be pretty good if we were to create, a thoroughly investigated argument for how it should work differently, and make it work differently and work correctly all the time and not introduce new bugs, because that always sucks when that happens. But I would say that that's actually something that would be totally plausible for changing. I think that a lot of people find it to be very confusing, the way that it works, the way that it doesn't close the box when you're done selecting the image, where it puts the select image thing, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's funny, at the beginning of your talk, you were talking about how a link typically needs to go somewhere else. The first thing I thought was, what about that set featured image?
Yeah, so that's what I don't like. And that's the thing, like knowing that just by, utilizing hooks, I can manipulate the interface to look the way that I think that it should work as a workflow, whether or not that's true for everybody, but I think it's a better workflow and maybe we can use ideas from it. Just knowing that you can do that by hooks means that maybe we should be able to do that in core. So, anything else? No? Okay, thank you.